You think you know entitlement? You haven't seen anything until you've watched a woman in a Chanel suit tell the owner of the airline that he belongs in row 48. Everyone thought it was just another seat dispute on a transatlantic flight, until the engines cut out. Complete silence. The pilot didn't announce a mechanical failure. He announced a name. In 5 minutes, a simple seat theft turned into a corporate execution that wiped out a family fortune before the landing gear even retracted. This isn't just a story about a plane ride. It's a lesson in who you step on. Because sometimes the guy in the hoodie isn't flying coach, he's signing the checks. The rain was hammering against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, turning the runway into a blur of grey concrete and flashing amber lights. Inside the cabin of Meridian Airlines Flight 882, bound for London Heathrow, the atmosphere was a carefully curated temperature of 68 degrees, scented with white tea and thyme. Damon Kincaid adjusted the strap of his battered leather duffel bag. He was exhausted. It had been a 90-hour week involving a hostile takeover of a logistics firm in Singapore and a board meeting in Seattle that had gone 3 hours over schedule. All he wanted was the lie-flat silence of seat 1A, a glass of bourbon, and 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. He wasn't dressed like the man who had just graced the cover of Forbes as the quiet Titan. He was wearing a charcoal hoodie, nondescript joggers, and a pair of vintage Nike sneakers. He looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like a tired graduate student or an off-duty tech support worker. That was the point. Damon hated being perceived. He boarded last. It was a habit. He liked to minimize the time spent sitting on the tarmac. As he turned left into the first-class cabin, the sanctuary class, as Meridian called it, he stopped dead in the aisle. Seat 1A was occupied. It wasn't just occupied, it was being colonized. A woman with chemically bright blonde hair, styled in a rigid bob that defied gravity, was spread out across the seat. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere power suit that probably cost more than a Honda Civic. Her carry-on, a Louis Vuitton trunk, was jammed into the footwell, and she had already opened the complimentary amenity kit, scattering La Mer creams across the side table. Damon blinked, checking his boarding pass on his phone. A. Definitely 1A. He took a breath. He didn't have the energy for this. He stepped forward, his voice low and gravelly from lack of sleep. "Excuse me." The woman didn't look up. She was tapping furiously on an iPhone 15 Pro Max, the brightness set to blinding. "Ma'am." Damon tried again, slightly louder. She held up a finger, a diamond the size of a skating rink flashing under the cabin lights. "1 second. I am finishing a tweet." Damon waited. 5 seconds. 10. The line of passengers behind him in the jet bridge was starting to stall, though they were boarding through the second door for economy. The flight attendants were busy prepping the galley champagne. Finally, she lowered the phone, removed her sunglasses, and looked him up and down. Her eyes were ice blue and filled with an immediate, visceral disdain. She scanned the hoodie, the joggers, the scuffed sneakers. "If you're looking for the trash disposal, it's in the galley," she said, her voice dripping with a mid-Atlantic accent that screamed old money or desperate new money trying to fake it. "Or are you here to take my drink order? If so, this champagne is warm. Take it back." Damon tightened his grip on his bag. "I'm not the steward. You're in my seat." The woman laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be ridiculous. This is first class. The economy cabin is back through the galley, past the curtain. I think you're lost, sweetie. Row 40 is that way." She waved her hand dismissively toward the back of the plane. "I have my boarding pass right here," Damon said, holding up his phone. "Seat 1A. Damon Kincaid." She didn't even look at the screen. She picked up her glass of champagne and took a sip, holding eye contact with him. I don't care what your little app says. I am comfortable. I am Patricia Vander Woodson. My husband is on the board of the Port Authority. I don't move for people who look like they sell bootleg DVDs in Times Square. The air in the cabin shifted. A businessman in seat 2B lowered his newspaper. A tech executive in 1K pulled out his AirPods. Damon felt that familiar heat rise in his chest. It wasn't just the theft. It was the assumption. The swift, confident calculus she had made that he was lesser. "Ms. Vander Woodson," Damon said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. "I am going to ask you one time to move to your assigned seat. If you don't, this flight is going to get very complicated for you." "Are you threatening me?" Patricia gasped, loud enough for the entire front cabin to hear. She clutched her pearls theatrically. "Stewardess, help! There is a man harassing me." Sarah, the lead flight attendant, rushed over from the galley. She was a veteran of the skies, having flown with Meridian for 15 years. She took one look at Patricia, then looked at Damon. Her eyes widened slightly. She recognized him. Not from the news, but from the manifest. The VVIP tag next to 1A was usually reserved for heads of state or A-list celebrities. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah asked, her voice professional but tight. "This hooligan is trying to mug me for my seat," Patricia spat. "Remove him immediately. I feel unsafe." Sarah turned to Damon. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Damon showed it to her. Sarah turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, may I see yours?" Patricia huffed, digging into her Chanel purse. She pulled out a crumpled paper pass. Sarah uncrumpled it. "Ma'am," Sarah said, her voice stealing, "this boarding pass is for seat 4B. That is in business class, not first. You are in the wrong cabin entirely." 4B was unacceptable, Patricia snapped. "It was too close to the lavatory. I saw this seat was empty, so I upgraded myself. It's called initiative. Something neither of you would understand." "That isn't how it works," Sarah said. "You need to move. This gentleman has paid for this seat." Patricia looked at Damon again, a sneer curling her lip. "Him? Paid? Please. He probably used miles he stole or got an employee discount. Look at him. He doesn't belong here. I am staying. My family has flown Meridian since the 90s. If you make me move, I will have your job, and I will have him arrested." Damon sighed. He looked at his watch. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus, mostly hidden by his sleeve. It was worth more than the plane's landing gear. "Sarah," Damon said softly. "Yes, Mr. Kincaid." "Is the cockpit door still open?" "Yes, sir. Captain Reynolds is doing pre-flight checks." "Good." Damon didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't call security. He stepped back, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number that wasn't in the public directory. It was a direct line to the private office of the chairman of the board for Meridian Global Holdings. Patricia rolled her eyes. "Oh, look, he's calling his mum." Damon held the phone to his ear. "Hello, Jonathan. It's Damon." "Yes, I'm on the 882 out of JFK. Listen, we have a situation. I need you to authorize a code black grounding for this aircraft. Yes, immediately. I'll explain to the shareholders later. Just do it." He hung up. Patricia laughed. "Code black? What is this? A movie? Sit down in economy or get off." Damon looked at her, his face completely expressionless. "I'm not going to economy, Patricia, and you're not going to London." The reaction was instantaneous. Less than 60 seconds after Damon hung up, the ambient hum of the auxiliary power unit, APU, whined down. The air conditioning vents stopped blowing. The cabin lights flickered and switched to a dim, emergency amber. The silence that followed was heavy. Captain Reynolds's voice crackled over the PA system. He sounded confused, perhaps even a little shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have just received an urgent directive from corporate headquarters. We have been ordered to hold our position at the gate. All engines are to be cut. We have a ground stop issued specifically for this aircraft." Murmurs erupted throughout the plane. In first class, the passengers looked around nervously. Patricia looked confused. "Why did the air turn off? It's getting stuffy." She waved a manicured hand in front of her face. "Stewardess, turn the AC back on." Sarah ignored her. She was watching Damon. Damon was leaning against the bulkhead, arms crossed, waiting. Suddenly, the cockpit door opened. Captain Reynolds, a man with graying temples and 4 gold stripes on his shoulder, stepped out. He was holding a tablet computer. He looked grave. "Who is the lead FA?" Reynolds asked. "I am, Captain," Sarah said. "I just got a message via ACARS directly from the CEO's office. It overrides everything. They said the majority shareholder is on board and has initiated a security protocol regarding a hostile passenger." Reynolds scanned the cabin. "Who is in 1A?" Patricia sat up straighter, fluffing her hair. "I am. And about time the captain came out. This man is harassing me." She pointed a long, accusatory finger at Damon. Reynolds looked at Damon. He squinted. Then his face went pale. He recognized the face. He had seen it in the annual company newsletter and on the specialized briefing videos sent to senior captains. Damon Kincaid wasn't just a shareholder. Through his private equity firm, Kincaid & Co., Damon had acquired a 51% controlling stake in Meridian Airlines 3 months ago. The acquisition was kept quiet to prevent stock volatility, but every senior employee knew the face of the new boss. Reynolds snapped to attention, his posture stiffening. "Mr. Kincaid." The cabin went deadly silent. Patricia froze. Her finger was still pointing, but it wavered slightly. "Mr. Who?" "Captain Reynolds," Damon said, extending a hand. "Sorry to interrupt your schedule. I know you have a slot time to hit." "Sir, it's an honor." Reynolds shook his hand, ignoring Patricia entirely. "We received the grounding order. What are your instructions?" "I have an intruder in my seat," Damon said calmly, gesturing to Patricia. "She refuses to move. She claims I don't belong here. She has threatened the crew's employment." Reynolds turned his gaze to Patricia. The warmth vanished from his eyes. "Ma'am, is this true?" Patricia was faltering, but her entitlement was a sturdy fortress. She doubled down. "I don't know who this actor is, or why you're playing along, but this is ridiculous. I am Patricia van der Woodson. My husband does not own this airplane," Damon interrupted. "I do." He stepped closer to the seat, leaning down so he was eye level with her. "Let me clarify something for you, Patricia. You think power is a loud voice and a platinum credit card. You think you can judge a man by his hoodie. But the reality is, you are currently trespassing on private property." Damon turned to the captain. "Captain, I want this plane deboarded. Everyone off." "Everyone, sir?" Reynolds asked. "No," Damon corrected himself. "Actually, just her. But since she refuses to move, I am cancelling the flight." "You can't do that," Patricia shrieked. "There are 300 people on this plane. And they will all be rebooked on the next flight, with a $1,000 voucher for their trouble paid for by my discretionary fund," Damon said. "But this plane isn't moving an inch until you are escorted off by federal authorities." "Federal?" Patricia squeaked. "Interfering with a flight crew is a federal offense," Damon said. "And since you've delayed a transatlantic flight, cost the airline roughly $50,000 in fuel and gate fees, and harassed the owner, I'd say the bill is going to be substantial. Damon looked at Sarah. Open the door. You're bluffing, Patricia hissed. You wouldn't dare. Damon didn't answer. He just pulled out his phone again and opened the camera app. Say cheese, Patricia. You're about to be famous. At that moment, the jet bridge alarm sounded. The door was reopening. But it wasn't the gate agents coming back on. 2 officers from the Port Authority Police Department stepped onto the plane, their hands resting on their utility belts. Behind them was a woman in a sharp navy suit, the airport station manager for Meridian. Where is she? The manager asked, looking breathless. Damon pointed to 1A. The lady in the cream suit. She's trespassing. The officers marched down the aisle. The heavy thud of their boots on the carpet was the only sound in the cabin. Ma'am, the lead officer said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Grab your bag. You're coming with us. This is a mistake, Patricia screamed, clinging to the armrests. Do you know who I am? Call my husband. Richard. Call Richard. You can call him from the precinct, the officer said. He reached down and firmly unlatched her fingers from the seat. Let's go. Don't make us use cuffs. The struggle was brief but humiliating. Patricia was hauled out of the seat, her Louis Vuitton bag knocking over the champagne glass she had been nursing. The liquid spilled onto the beige leather. Damon's leather. As she was dragged past Damon, she thrashed, her face red with fury. You'll pay for this. I'll sue you for everything you have. You're nothing. You're nobody. Damon didn't look at her. He picked up a napkin and began dabbing the champagne off the seat. I'm the guy who grounded the airline, he murmured. I think I'm somebody. As Patricia was hauled up the jet bridge, screaming obscenities that echoed down the tunnel, the entire first-class cabin burst into spontaneous applause. The businessman in 2B clapped the loudest. Damon turned to the cabin and raised a hand for silence. I apologize for the delay, everyone. We'll have to wait a few minutes for a cleaning crew to handle this seat. Drinks are on the house for the duration of the flight. He sat down in 1A, wet spot and all, and buckled his belt. Captain Reynolds stood at the front of the cabin. Sir, are we clear to reinitiate start procedures? Not yet, Captain, Damon said, his eyes dark. She mentioned her husband is on the board of the Port Authority. Richard van der Woodsen, right? I believe so, sir. Get me the legal department on the sat phone, Damon said, leaning his head back and closing his eyes. I want to look into Richard's financials. If his wife acts like this in public, I wonder what they're hiding in private. The drama on the plane was over, but the war had just begun, and Patricia had no idea that while she was being fingerprinted, Damon Kincaid was about to dismantle her life, piece by piece. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, but the internet is infinite. While Damon Kincaid slept for 6 hours in the newly sanitized seat 1A, cruising at 38,000 feet over the dark water, the world below was waking up to a digital explosion. The businessman in seat 2B, a 24-year-old tech prodigy named Caleb, striving for his first million, hadn't just clapped, he had recorded. By the time Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow Terminal 3, the video titled, Entitled Woman Tries to Evict Airline Owner, Instant Karma, had 14 million views on TikTok and was trending #1 on X, formerly Twitter, worldwide. Damon didn't know this yet. He woke up as the wheels kissed the tarmac, feeling refreshed. He accepted a hot towel from Sarah, who treated him with a reverence usually reserved for religious figures. Mr. Kincaid, she whispered as the plane taxied. I just wanted to thank you again. In 20 years of flying, I've never seen anyone stand up for the crew like that. Usually the company makes us apologize to the abusers. Damon wiped his face. The company has changed, Sarah. If anyone treats you like furniture again, you have my direct line." He grabbed his bag and deplaned first. He expected a quiet car ride to his hotel in Mayfair. Instead, as he walked out of the jet bridge and into the terminal, he saw phones, hundreds of them. Passengers waiting at the gate for the return flight were pointing at him. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. "That's him. That's the guy in the hoodie. The quiet titan." Damon frowned. He pulled his hood up and walked faster. He turned on his phone. It nearly vibrated out of his hand. 82 missed calls, 400 texts, and one urgent voicemail from his chief legal officer, Sloan Mercer. Damon bypassed the chauffeur, waiting with a sign, and jumped into the back of a waiting black Mercedes S-Class that his London security team had prepped. "Go," he told the driver, "and get Sloan on the screen." A moment later, the face of Sloan Mercer appeared on the car's infotainment system. She was in the New York office, looking sharp, terrifying, and exhausted. "You're the most famous man on the planet right now," Sloan said without a preamble, "and we have a problem." "I grounded a plane to remove a trespasser," Damon said, looking out at the grey London skyline. "I assume the board is annoyed about the fuel cost?" "The board is thrilled. Their stock just jumped 4% because strong leadership is trending," Sloan corrected. "The problem isn't the board, it's Richard van der Woodsen." Damon's eyes narrowed. "The husband," Sloan confirmed. "He just held a press conference outside the Port Authority offices in Newark. He's spinning this. Hard." Sloan tapped a key, and a video clip played on the screen in the car. Richard van der Woodsen was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a country club. He had silver hair, a tan that was too orange for November, and teeth that cost more than a mortgage. He stood before a bank of microphones, looking aggrieved. "My wife, a fragile woman with anxiety, was brutally manhandled by Meridian Airlines security," Richard shouted into the mics. "She was confused about her seat assignment, a simple mistake. Instead of compassion, she was met with aggression by a man who refused to identify himself, a thug in a sweatshirt. We are filing a $50 million lawsuit against Meridian for emotional distress, assault, and defamation. And furthermore, as a board member of the Port Authority, I will be reviewing Meridian's lease agreements at JFK. If they can't treat passengers with respect, maybe they don't deserve gates at our airport." The video cut off. Damon stared at the blank screen. The silence in the car was heavy. "He's threatening the leases," Damon said softly. "He wants to choke our operations at our main hub because his wife got caught stealing a seat." "He's playing the victim card," Sloan said. "He's painting you as a violent aggressor and Patricia as a confused elderly woman. The media outlets that hate you, the ones who call you a corporate raider, are eating it up. The Daily Mail is already running a headline: 'Billionaire bully throws socialite off plane.'" Damon looked down at his hands. He didn't feel like a bully. He felt like a man who was tired of people like Richard and Patricia thinking the world was their personal buffet. "What do you want to do, Damon?" Sloan asked. "We can settle. Issue a generic apology. Pay them a few million to go away. It's the standard play." "No," Damon said. "Damon, if he pulls our leases—" I said no. Damon's voice was low, vibrating with a cold intensity. "He just threatened my company. He threatened the livelihoods of 30,000 employees because his ego is bruised. He wants a war? Fine. What's the play? Did you get the footage from the plane?" "We have the viral TikTok," Sloan said. "But we also have the cabin security camera footage, the new wide angles we installed during the retrofit." "Does it have audio?" "Crystal clear." "Good," Damon said. "Release the full unedited tape. Not just the argument, the part before I got there, the part where she insulted the flight attendant, the part where she called the pilot a chauffeur, and... Sloane? Yes. During the flight, while everyone was sleeping, I accessed the in-flight Wi-Fi and tunneled into the public records of the New York State Department of Buildings and the Port Authority vendor list. I found something interesting. Sloane raised an eyebrow. You did forensic accounting at 30,000 feet? I was bored, Damon shrugged. Patricia mentioned Richard was fixing something for a contractor. She was bragging about it to someone on the phone before I boarded. I heard her while I was standing in the jet bridge. You think she inadvertently confessed to a crime? I think the Vander Woodsons are sloppy, Damon said. I want you to look into a construction firm called Apex Heavy Industries. Richard approved a $200 million runway repaving contract for them last month. I want to know who owns Apex. On it, Sloane said, typing furiously. Where are you going now? Turn the car around, Damon told the driver. Sir? The driver asked, confused. We just left the airport. I know, Damon said. Take me back to the private terminal. Fuel up the Gulf Stream. I'm not staying in London. Where are we going? Sloane asked from the screen. Damon looked directly into the camera lens, his eyes dark and hard. New York. Richard wants a press conference. I think I'll crash it. New York City was grey and hostile when Damon landed 6 hours later. He hadn't slept. He had spent the entire return flight on a secure line with his forensic team and a private investigator named Cale, based in Zurich. The file they had compiled was 400 pages long. It sat in a heavy black binder on Damon's lap. He didn't go to his penthouse. He went straight to the Meridian Global Holdings headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. The building was a glass needle piercing the sky. Damon walked through the lobby, still wearing his hoodie, though he had swapped the joggers for dark jeans. The security guards nodded respectfully. They had seen the TikTok. They knew the boss had their back. He took the private elevator to the 50th floor, the executive suite. Richard Vander Woodson was already there. Sloane had orchestrated it perfectly. She had called Richard and told him that Mr. Kincaid was rattled by the lawsuit threat and wanted to meet personally to discuss a generous settlement. Richard, arrogant and smelling blood in the water, had agreed to come, bringing his high-priced lawyer, a man named Sterling, who looked like a shark in a pinstripe suit. They were waiting in the main conference room, a room with a 30-foot mahogany table and a view of the Empire State Building. Damon paused outside the frosted glass doors. He could hear Richard's voice booming inside. Going to demand a public apology on primetime TV, and I want lifetime first-class status for Patricia, to compensate for the trauma. We can ask for more, Richard, the lawyer, Sterling, was saying. We can ask for a seat on the board, force him to give you oversight. I like that, Richard chuckled. Me, overseeing the man who threw my wife off a plane. Poetic. Damon pushed the doors open. The heavy oak doors slammed against the wall with a thunderous crack. Richard and Sterling jumped. Damon walked in, the black binder tucked under his arm. He didn't look rattled. He looked like a demolition expert walking toward a condemned building. He threw the binder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that shook the water glasses. Gentlemen, Damon said, not sitting down. Get out. Richard blinked, adjusting his silk tie. Excuse me, we are here for a settlement meeting. Where is your legal team? I don't need a team to deal with you, Damon said. He walked to the head of the table and stood there, looming over them. And there will be no settlement. I brought you here to give you a head start. A head start? Sterling scoffed. Mr. Kincaid, my client is prepared to sue you for... Shut up, Damon said. He didn't shout, but the command was so absolute that Sterling's mouth snapped shut. Damon looked at Richard. You threatened my airline. You threatened my people. You said you'd review my leases. And I will, Richard blustered, his face turning a shade of angry red. I am a senior member of the Port Authority Board. I control who flies in and out of JFK. You humiliated my wife. Your wife humiliated herself, Damon said. But that's irrelevant now. What's relevant is Apex Heavy Industries. The color drained from Richard's face instantly. It was as if someone had pulled a plug in his heel. He went from angry red to a sickly, paste-like grey. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard stammered. Damon reached into the binder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of Richard. That, Damon said, is a bank transfer record from the Cayman Islands. It shows a $3 million consulting fee paid by Apex Heavy Industries to a shell company called Blue Heron LLC. And guess who the registered agent of Blue Heron is? Richard didn't answer. His hands were shaking. It's Patricia, Damon said. Your wife. She's the signatory. You awarded a government contract to a company, and that company kicked back $3 million to your wife's shell corporation. Sterling, the lawyer, looked at the document. Then he looked at Richard. He slowly closed his briefcase. Richard, Sterling said quietly, is this true? It's complicated, Richard whispered. It was a finder's fee. It's embezzlement, wire fraud, and public corruption. Damon listed them off, casually. And since you used the US banking system, it's also federal racketeering. Damon leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. You wanted to review my leases? Go ahead. But while you were holding your press conference this morning, I sent this binder to the district attorney's office and to the FBI. Richard stood up, knocking his chair over. You can't do that. We can work this out. Damon, please. I can make the lawsuit go away. I can get you better gates. Terminals 1 and 4. Anything. I don't want your favors, Richard, Damon said, his voice dripping with disgust. I want you gone. Damon pressed a button on the intercom. Send them in. The conference room doors opened again. This time, it wasn't flight attendants. It was 4 federal agents in windbreakers marked FBI. Richard looked at the window, perhaps contemplating if he could jump, but the glass was reinforced. Richard Vander Woodson, the lead agent said, stepping forward with handcuffs. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bribery. As the agents moved in, Richard looked at Damon with wild, terrified eyes. Why? Why did you dig this deep? It was just a seat. It was just one seat. Damon watched as they cuffed Richard's hands behind his back. No, Richard, Damon said, his voice flat. It was never just a seat. It was the entitlement. You thought you could take what wasn't yours because you thought you were untouchable. You thought because I wore a hoodie, I was weak. You forgot the first rule of business. What rule? Richard spat as he was shoved toward the door. Always know who you're negotiating with, Damon said. The agents dragged Richard out. Sterling, the lawyer, lingered for a second, looking at Damon. I assume my services are no longer required by Mr. Vander Woodson, Sterling said nervously. I'd assume he can't afford you anymore, Damon replied, since I just filed a civil lien against his assets to recover the costs of my grounded flight. I own his house, his car, and yes, Patricia's Louis Vuitton bag. Sterling nodded once, terrified, and fled the room. Damon was left alone in the silent conference room. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Manhattan. He pulled out his phone. He had one more call to make. The war wasn't over. Patricia was still out there, and the internet was still burning. He dialed Sloane. "Richard is in custody," Damon said. "Now, let's talk about the video. I want to release the footage from the plane. All of it." "Are you sure?" Sloane asked. "It's going to destroy her." "She tried to destroy a flight attendant's career because her champagne was warm," Damon said, turning away from the window. "Upload it." The video was titled, simply, Flight 882, the uncut footage. It didn't have music. It didn't have a voiceover. It was raw, high-definition security footage from 3 different angles within the cabin of the Meridian Airbus. It was uploaded to Meridian Airline's official YouTube channel and X account at 9:00 a.m. the next morning. By 9:15 a.m., the internet had broken. Patricia van der Woodsen was sitting in the solarium of her Upper East Side penthouse, nursing a migraine and a Bloody Mary. The morning sun was streaming in, illuminating the silk tapestries and the Fabergé egg collection on the mantelpiece. She felt safe here. The precinct had been a nightmare. Fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, the humiliation of having her mugshot taken. But Richard's lawyers had bailed her out within 2 hours. She was convinced it would blow over. "It's just a misunderstanding," she told herself. "Richard will fix it. He always fixes it." Then her phone buzzed. Then it dinged. Then it began to vibrate so continuously it skittered across the marble table like a frantic beetle. She picked it up. Her Instagram notifications were a blur of red. She opened the app. Her latest photo, a picture of her bespoke garden in the Hamptons, had 50,000 new comments. "Thief. Racist. Give the man his seat. Enjoy prison, Patty." Confused, she opened Twitter. The first thing she saw was her own face, distorted in a scream, frozen in a thumbnail on a video with 20 million views. She pressed play. She watched herself. She watched herself call the pilot a chauffeur. She heard the sneer in her voice as she told the flight attendant that she would have her fired. She saw Damon, calm, collected, standing there while she berated him. But the worst part wasn't the yelling. It was the audio clarity. At the 0:45 mark of the video, before Damon had even boarded, the camera picked up Patricia talking on her phone to a friend. "Oh, don't worry about the renovation costs, darling. Richard just pushed through that runway contract for Apex. We channeled the kickback through Blue Heron. It's basically free money. I'm thinking of redoing the kitchen in Italian marble." Patricia dropped her phone. It hit the marble floor and cracked. The blood drained from her face. She hadn't realized anyone was listening. She hadn't realized the cameras had microphones. She had confessed to federal wire fraud on a recorded line, on a plane owned by the man she was robbing. The intercom to the penthouse buzzed. It was the doorman. "Mrs. van der Woodsen." The doorman's voice sounded strained. I can't stop them." "Stop who?" Patricia whispered. "The press and the FBI. They're in the elevator." Before she could move, the front door of the penthouse splintered open. It wasn't a polite knock this time. It was a raid. Agents in tactical gear swarmed the apartment. They weren't just looking for her. They were seizing assets. They began tagging paintings, furniture, and electronics. "Patricia van der Woodsen," an agent shouted. "Step away from the table." "This is my house," she screamed, retreating behind a sofa. "Where is my husband? Where is Richard?" A tall woman in a suit walked in. It was Sloane Mercer, Damon's chief legal officer. She wasn't there to arrest Patricia. She was there to deliver the final twist of the knife. She held a thick envelope. "Richard isn't coming, Patricia," Sloane said, coolly, stepping over a seized Persian rug. "He's calling the governor right now," Patricia shrieked. "He'll have your badges." Richard is currently in a holding cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Sloane said. And he's been very chatty. He's cutting a deal. Patricia froze. A deal? He claims that you were the mastermind behind Blue Heron LLC, Sloane said, enjoying the look of horror on Patricia's face. He claims he was manipulated by his greedy wife into approving the contracts. He's turning state's evidence against you to reduce his sentence. Sloane tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. And he wanted me to give you this. Patricia reached out with trembling hands and opened the envelope. It was a petition for divorce. Richard Vander Woodson versus Patricia Vander Woodson. He's freezing your joint assets, Sloane explained. He's trying to salvage what he can. You have no access to the bank accounts, no access to the credit cards, and as of this morning, thanks to the civil lien Mr. Kincaid filed, this apartment is now under the control of the court receivership. I have nothing, Patricia whispered, looking around the room as agents boxed up her silverware. I have nowhere to go. You have a government-appointed attorney, Sloane said, checking her watch. And I believe they're waiting for you downtown. I'd suggest you wear something comfortable. Orange isn't really your color, but you'll have to get used to it. Patricia sank onto the sofa, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The friends were gone. The money was gone. The status was gone. Even the husband who enabled her behavior had thrown her to the wolves to save his own skin. And all because she didn't want to sit in seat 4B. 3 months later. The snow was falling softly on the manicured lawns of Greenwich, Connecticut. The Vander Woodson estate, a sprawling 12-bedroom Georgian manor, looked like a postcard for the American dream. But the sign on the front gate told a different story. United States Marshals Service Asset Forfeiture Auction. The driveway was packed with cars, not the Ferraris and Bentleys that used to park here for Patricia's summer galas, but practical sedans, auction house trucks, and the vans of curious onlookers. Everything must go. The government needed to recoup the millions stolen in the Apex Heavy Industries scandal, and Meridian Airlines was first in line for restitution. Inside the grand ballroom, rows of folding chairs were set up. The air smelled of damp coats and desperation. Damon Kincaid stood at the back of the room. He wasn't wearing a hoodie today. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO. He stood next to Sarah, the flight attendant from Flight 882. You didn't have to bring me, Mr. Kincaid, Sarah said, looking around the opulent room with wide eyes. I wanted you to see it, Damon said quietly. Karma isn't always spiritual, Sarah. Sometimes it's bureaucratic. Sometimes it's an auctioneer with a gavel. The auction was in full swing. Lot 405, the auctioneer droned. A 19th century French chandelier. Opening bid at 5,000. Damon watched the crowd. In the front row, he saw faces he recognized. Rival socialites, eager to pick over the carcass of Patricia's life. They were buying her jewelry, her art, her dignity, piece by piece. Then he saw her. Patricia was standing near the caterer's entrance, half hidden by a curtain. She was out on bail pending trial, but she looked like a ghost of her former self. Her hair was grown out, the roots showing grey. She was wearing a simple coat that looked like it came from a thrift store. She wasn't allowed to participate in the auction. She was just there to watch. She couldn't stay away. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 882, he announced. The number was a coincidence, but a poetic one. 2 assistants brought out a large item. It was a vintage Louis Vuitton steamer trunk. The leather was aged to perfection, the brass hardware gleaming. It was the bag she had jammed into the footwell of seat 1A, the bag she had valued more than another human being's dignity. Opening bid is $2,000, the auctioneer said. Patricia let out a small, strangled sob from the corner. That trunk had belonged to her grandmother. It was the only thing she truly loved. 2,000, a dealer in the front row said. 3,000, a woman in a fur coat shouted. 5,000, said the dealer. Damon stepped forward from the back wall. He didn't raise a paddle, he just raised his hand. $50,000, Damon said. His voice carried through the room, silencing the murmurs. The auctioneer blinked. I have 50,000 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 55? The room went dead silent. No one was going to bid against that. The dealer put his paddle down. Going once, the auctioneer said. Going twice. Bang. Sold to the gentleman in the navy suit. Damon walked up to the front to claim his prize. As he signed the paperwork, he felt a presence beside him. It was Patricia. She looked small, defeated. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Please, she whispered. Her voice was trembling. Please, Mr. Kincaid, not the trunk. It's all I have left of my family history. Take the house. Take the cars. But please, let me have the trunk. Damon looked at her. He remembered the way she had looked at him on the plane, like he was trash, like he was invisible. You know, Damon said softly, capping his pen. On that flight, if you had just asked me nicely, if you had said, Sir, I'm having a hard day. Is there any way we could switch? I probably would have done it. I don't care about first-class seats. I care about respect. I'm sorry, Patricia wept. I'm so sorry. I've lost everything. Richard left me. My friends hate me. I'm facing 5 years in prison. Please, just give me this one kindness. Damon looked at the trunk. Then he looked at Sarah, the flight attendant. Sarah, Damon said. Yes, sir. Do you like this trunk? Sarah blinked. It's beautiful, sir. But I could never afford it. It's yours, Damon said. Patricia gasped. What? Consider it a bonus for handling a difficult passenger with grace, Damon said to Sarah. Use it for your travels, or sell it. It's worth quite a lot. Sarah covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Mr. Kincaid, I don't know what to say. Damon turned back to Patricia. Her face was a mask of pure shock and devastation. You don't get to keep the trophies of a life you stole, Patricia, Damon said, his voice hard as granite. You wanted the seat. You paid for the seat. Now Sarah gets the seat. And the baggage. He signaled to his security detail. One of the guards picked up the heavy trunk and carried it over to Sarah. Damon buttoned his jacket. Come on, Sarah. We have a plane to catch. I believe we're flying economy today. I hear the people there are nicer. He walked out of the ballroom, leaving Patricia van der Woodsen standing alone in the center of the empty room, surrounded by strangers who were busy buying her silverware. She watched him go, realizing too late that the man in the hoodie was never the enemy. He was the mirror, and she had broken herself against his reflection. 6 months after the auction, Meridian Airlines Flight 882 was boarding again at JFK. The rain was falling, just as it had on that fateful night, turning the runway into a shimmering mirror. But inside the terminal, everything was different. The boarding area for Meridian Airlines had been completely renovated. The old, tired grey carpet was replaced with sleek, modern flooring. The lighting was warm and welcoming, but the biggest change was the culture. Damon Kincaid sat in the gate area. This time, he wasn't wearing a hoodie. He was wearing a simple company polo shirt with the Meridian logo, chatting with a group of baggage handlers. He made a point of flying his own airline once a week, rotating through different jobs to understand the challenges his employees faced. Today, He was shadowing the gate agents. "Mr. Kincaid," a young agent named Leo said nervously, "we're ready to board first class." "Go ahead, Leo," Damon smiled. "And remember the new protocol." Leo nodded. He picked up the microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Flight 882 to London. At Meridian, we believe respect is the ultimate luxury. We invite our first-class passengers to board, but we also remind everyone that kindness is mandatory in all cabins. Please treat our crew with the dignity they deserve." It was a small change to the script, but the passengers noticed. There was a politeness in the line that hadn't been there before. The Kincaid effect, the business journals called it. As the passengers filed onto the plane, Damon saw a familiar face. It was Sarah. She was the purser on this flight, wearing a new uniform that she had helped design as part of the employee advisory board Damon had established. "Ready for another run, Sarah?" Damon asked, walking down the jet bridge with her. "Always, boss." She smiled. She looked lighter, happier. The stress lines around her eyes had softened. "By the way, I sold the trunk." "Oh." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Get a good price?" "Enough to pay off my mortgage and put my daughter through her first 2 years of college," Sarah beamed. "It turns out there's a high demand for historical artifacts from the Vander Woodson collection." Damon laughed. "I'm glad to hear it." He walked onto the plane, but he didn't turn left into 1A. He turned right. He walked past the curtain, past the business class pods, all the way to row 34. Seat E. A middle seat in economy. He tossed his bag into the overhead bin and sat down, sandwiched between a college student reading a manga and an elderly man knitting a scarf. "Excuse me, young man," the elderly knitter said, looking at Damon. "You look familiar. Do I know you?" Damon smiled, buckling his seatbelt. "I don't think so. I just work here." "Well," the man said, offering Damon a peppermint. "It's a nice airline. They treat people right. Heard the owner is a good guy. A bit intense, maybe, but good." "I'll be sure to tell him you said so," Damon said, unwrapping the mint. As the plane pushed back, Damon looked out the window. Far across the tarmac, he saw a construction crew working on the runway. It was a new crew. Apex Heavy Industries had been dissolved, and its contracts voided. The new company was a minority-owned firm that had been vetted personally by Damon's team. Justice had been served. Patricia was currently serving a 24-month sentence in a minimum security facility in Danbury, learning to make bedsheets for pennies an hour. Richard was under house arrest in a rented condo in Florida, his reputation permanently incinerated. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was here, in the hum of the engines and the quiet peace of the cabin. The victory was knowing that no one on this plane would be belittled today. The victory was proving that you can be the nice guy and the guy who signs the checks. Damon Kincaid closed his eyes, finally getting the rest he had wanted 6 months ago. The engines roared to life. The plane accelerated, lifting off into the dark, wet sky, rising above the clouds where the air was smooth and the stars were waiting. The seat was small, the legroom was tight, but to Damon it felt like a throne, because this time the flight was honest, and that made it the best seat in the house, and that is how one entitled moment cost a socialite her freedom, her fortune, and her dignity. It's a harsh reminder that in the modern world, cameras are everywhere, and character is revealed when you think no one important is watching. Patricia thought she was fighting a nobody in a hoodie. She didn't realize she was fighting the man who could turn off the sky. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about the fact that true power doesn't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes it just needs to make a phone call. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice and corporate karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Damon? Would you have grounded the plane or just taken the other seat? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.